Do you think that when we get typed or profiled in that way, that we should seek to change it? Do you think you evolve through life, or do you think it is set by nature versus nurture?
Well, so I think each one is different. So there's trait-based typing and, there's type-based. I think that if you look at Myers-Briggs, the research would say that it is trait, meaning you are born that way. I always think that your environment influences you. I always think that you need to adapt in order to live in accordance with your values. But I also think that when we try to fight the things that are trait-based, I think that there's a root of sadness in that. And there's a root of desire to be something that you can't be, right? And then you get into this issue. And I think that happens whether it's trait-based or type-based. It doesn't matter whether it's hard-coded or coming from our upbringing. We all have a set of preferences of how we want to be in the world, how we want to live, how we want to be perceived.
Welcome to Unreasonable Autonomy. My name is Sarah Grace. This is the podcast for entrepreneurs and innovators who refuse to settle. Here we dive deep into raw, real conversations with boundary pushers who have pursued seemingly impossible ideas and yet have achieved unreasonable results, whether that's in their faith, relationships, health, politics, yes, even business. All of those conversations are happening right here, right now. So let's buckle up because this isn't about playing it safe. Unreasonable ideas, unstoppable results. Let's go.
You guys, welcome back to the podcast. Welcome back to Dear Entrepreneur, where we are diving into the heart and soul of what we wish we had known when we were young or when we were a teenager or when we didn't want to listen to anybody else. That's what we're diving in. My name is Sarah Allred. I am your host today, and I don't want to waste any time. We have got one of the most fantastic humans on earth here in the studio today. Everybody welcome the Andrea Peer. We're glad you're here, Andrea.
Hi, Sarah. That was a very kind introduction.
Well, I want to give more to the introduction because when I say the word human, this goes deep into my blood on why I love Andrea. So I feel very blessed that I've actually met Andrea in person. I have sat by her. I have also been able to dive into her group, the GeekOut, which we'll talk all about that a little bit later. But something that I have really, really loved about you, Andrea, is that while you are brilliant and while you can speak the language of developers and while you can teach people about automation and memberships and linchpins and all these things, you have a non-negotiable in your world, in my opinion. And if I'm wrong, you just tell me because this is a live podcast, right? You just tell me because your non-negotiable is that we must operate a business as if we are serving actual humans. Is that true?
Yes, 100%. Yes.
Okay. And I have to say that while that is becoming more and more to the forefront of what we're doing, because we're actually waking up, right, on how important that is, you were one of the first people that I felt like was willing to let lots of things go if it didn't serve the human. And I just respect you for that so deeply.
Well, thanks. Well, and I would add to that too, which is a really important part. And that is not just that we're serving humans, but that we're human. We have to bring our human to the table or else we can't serve humans. And it's a mirrored relationship. Yeah.
Well, it's really fascinating. And I just actually want to start talking to you because I've been reading the book, Dale Carnegie, right? How to Win Friends and Influence People. You guys have written in the 30s, I swear, 40s, something like that. Right. And it's still the Bible of getting along with humans for so long. Have you always been really, really good at connecting with humans?
Well, so I think it's a really nuanced question. So I think I was, do you know what Clifton Strengths Finder?
Yes.
The woo. Okay. So I definitely have a strength of woo. So I'm pretty communicative. I'm pretty positive. And so I think those traits, and I get really excited. I get very optimistic. I come with a lot of energy. And I think that those things are in that woo category of I am able to connect with people superficially really fast. And I didn't understand that. And I didn't understand the depth of a relationship or the intimacy of a relationship because I just was people are fun, And so I think because of that natural woo strength, I think for most of my life, probably until my corporate career ended, for me, I think increasingly by connecting to people, it was very superficial. And eventually in my like peak of my corporate, it was people are transactions. I mean, how can I manipulate? How can I, and I can tell you, right, I can say like, I didn't mean intent. I wasn't trying to be mean, but if I'm really being honest, it was, how can I get this person to like me so I can get what I want? I mean, that was the nature of the connection. And I think it took quite a bit of waking up for me to realize what true connection actually is.
It's super good. So you talk about woo, right? And that's one of your strengths, but that it's almost been a hindrance to you. So I actually want to talk to you about those kinds of like strength finders and like what type are you or draping or whatever. Do you think they're good?
Oh my gosh.
Valuable things. Talk to me.
I think they're hugely valuable is the short answer. Okay. I think people get really hung up around the axle of like, don't put me in a box or like, and I think I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent that might not make total sense.
There's no tangent here.
Yeah. So I used to work with agronomists and my John Deere days. And I worked with this older agronomist and he was wonderful. And his name is Chip Donahue. And he had this saying, and he said, when we talk to these data scientists and they go into the farmers, right? And the farmer's like, this is crazy. I've been here for years. Like your model is hogwash. You know what I mean? But, and the agronomist, Chip, he would always come and he'd say, some are helpful. And that's what my take is on all of these like personality type indicators. I do prefer ones that are more research-based just as a good starting point. But I think all of them are flawed in some way and not 100% accurate, but they're hugely helpful in terms of bridge language and increasing self-awareness. Even the fact of just grappling, like, is this me or not me? That question is more powerful than the knowing of what the answer is. And so I think all of them are hugely powerful for increased awareness and increased bridge language for one another.
So where are they dangerous?
I think where they're dangerous is if they're, again, this is my research bias, that if they're really not grounded in anything other than somebody's great idea. So like in our marketing world, right, we have a lot of like surveys and quizzes and like, what type are you? And it's just kind of like made up, right? It's not grounded in any kind of like theory or research or even like, and I don't even think it has to be in the halls of academia. It could be, a lot of like Jungian psychology is actually based in more like astrology, I mean,
sure.
But it's still like the depth of thought and the depth of understanding and the more ancient traditions is still informing it, right? It's not just someone's opinion. And so those are the parts where I think are, yeah.
Yeah. So it's similar to what you were saying, where is it a surfacey typing? Right. Where is my intention to get an email address out of you and to sell you a product? I mean, it's the same concept, right?
Exactly. Yep,
where I'm being disingenuous or I actually do have malintent or I have selfish intent.
Yes.
And so I'm using a framework that can be really helpful and impactful for people, but I'm using it as a lead gen tool.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Yes. And it doesn't have that backing of, we don't have to recreate the wheel on a lot of our understanding about human knowledge and traits and values and types. And, this has been well researched. We don't have to reinvent that. We can leverage that power.
Yeah. And I love you because you see it from a bird's eye view because you are so well read, right? And you are research based and you've done the corporate thing and you've done all the things. So I think you bring so much perspective to the table. My question is have you ever worked with someone or have you ever experienced yourself that you've been typed or you've been, an anagram or whatever, all those kinds of things. And it then actually becomes a crutch of, this is just who I am. And so like I'm being the authentic me with really dangerous behavior. Like, I mean, I'm clearly putting my opinion into this.
Yeah. No,
it's where I think we get sketchy.
Yes. Yeah. I think right. And I think it's so interesting that you asked that question because I had this really profound conversation with my best friend yesterday on pretty much this, right? And
bring her on.
And it goes like this. Yeah. And it goes something like this. So my Myers-Briggs is I'm an ENFP. And I have some out of preference stuff and I'm really aware of that. And it's on that PJ on the last one, right?
Okay.
My value around time, right? My value around deadlines is not there. I think like as long as we're all working really hard and we're pushing towards the end and we're accomplishing, like we are clear in our intention, I think that time is this weird construct, like a societal construct that doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? And that is my natural bias, right? Now,
Okay.
members of, that I was working with, right? We were having a conflict around, like, there was an agreement on a deadline. And again, because of my natural bias, right? My first and this is me getting vulnerable, like my first totally horrible egoic response is, you're so short-sighted. Like, this deadline doesn't matter. Why do you care about this? Right. But in my conversation with my dear, dear friend, who happens to be a J, right? And she's talking to me about the emphasis on that commitment, and how important that commitment and that deadline, it's not about the deadline, it's about something bigger. Now, does that mean that I all of a sudden start valuing deadlines? No. But what that did do is, instead of just hiding behind, like, I do have a natural bias, I do have a natural value on non-time orientation, but that doesn't excuse me from the fact that I'm still working with other humans, that's important. And in our society, time and deadlines are important. And so, to your point but I think that comes with just understanding your bias, understanding why you're getting triggered, the commitment to, like, it is more important to me to connect and work with these humans than it is for me to hold on to this bias, or like, but the conversation changes too. So now the next conversation is like, I respect the fact that this is important to you, and I want to try to find a way for us to do that. If we rely on me valuing it, I'm going to fail you. So what can we put in place so that we can actually, like, I can demonstrate, you know what I mean, and act in accordance with the importance of us working together. But let's not have the expectation that I care about it as much as you do. And again, like, that's just this language of, you know what I mean? So it's not an excuse. It is a recognition, an acceptance, and then how do we bridge?
Okay, Dale Carnegie would have loved you, right? Like, first to understand, maybe that's Covey. I mean, I think it's all the same in some ways.
Yeah.
So do you think people should use these? And let's be fair, listeners.
Yeah.
We did not prepare to talk about this, but I'm so fascinated by this and your perspective, because you care so much about humans. Do you think that when we get typed or profiled in that way, that we should seek to change it?
No.
Like, do you think you evolve through life, or do you think it is set by, like, nature versus nurture, right? Like,
yeah. Well, so I think each one is different. So there is trait-based typing, and there's type-based. I think that, like, if you look at Myers-Briggs, the research would say that it is trait, meaning like you are born that way. I always think that your environment influences you. I always think that you need to adapt in order to live in accordance with your values, right?
Right.
But I also think that when we try to fight the things that are trait-based, I think that there's a root of sadness in that. And there's a root of desire to be something that you can't be, right? And then you get into this issue. And I think that happens whether it's trait-based or type-based, right? I think all of us it doesn't matter whether it's like hard-coded or coming from our upbringing. We all have a set of preferences of how we want to be in the world, how we want to live, how we want to be perceived. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's more important to understand those preferences, and then all that great boundary work that I'm still working on, right? Of like,
girl,
right? It's like, okay, this is my preference. How much do I want to bend? How much can I bend? Where can I bend? Where is my hard and fast rule of, like, I can't bend because it's too deep into who I am as a human right now, and I don't have the consciousness capacity to go there. Yeah.
Whoa, my mind is kind of blown, because what it's actually doing is
deep, Sarah. I love it.
It's so good. I mean, like, welcome to the party, because this is just the stuff that's not talked about, and yet it so deeply influences how we show up as a partner in business, how we show up within a family dynamic, all this kind of stuff. And I saw this quote the other day, and I want to know your perspective. It was from a really well-known therapist. She works a lot with couples and on family dynamics, and she deals with, sexuality, and she deals with, how religion gets brought into that world. And she came up with this quote that said, in order to become trustworthy, you must be willing to face how you are not trustworthy.
100%. Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Talk
yes.
to me.
Oh my gosh. So in my language, again, going back to my conversation with my best friend, she would call it the tyrant, and that all of us have a tyrant. All of us do. Because at the end of the day, we have a very large ego that is attached to us. There are very few living human beings that transcend ego in our current culture, right? And I think because of that ego, she is a clever little girl that wants very specific things. And I think that she will do tyrannical things in order to get it. And so I think on that note of, I think it's just then becoming aware of when that tyrant arises, and I think a lot of times we think the tyrant is like anger or over aggression or over controlling or right. But I think that
I'm thinking
but I think the tyrant can also be super passive, passive resistance, little jabs. I think, like the mean girls thing, right? That's all tyrant behavior. You know what I mean? Of like, because I don't know how to get what I want, I'm going to try to either power over or power under, you know what I mean? And try to do that. I think all of us have it, 100%.
Okay. So this is going to be like 2 hours, Andrea, write your team. This is so good. Because I feel specifically with our listeners, with entrepreneurs, we are a little bit more willing to acknowledge the tyrant because it kind of got us here. Because we're often a little bit fighty against the establishment and, whatever that may be.
Yeah, we were able to accomplish great things with that tyrant. Like she is an ally a lot of times. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, 100%. Yes.
So, because I guess what I want to get is I want to get a little bit tactical in how do you, when do you let her lead? Do you ever let her lead? Because she did get us somewhere.
Yes. Okay. So I don't have the answer to that, but here's the best I know right now.
Okay.
So I recently, got asked to talk on the Funnel Hacking Live stage. And when I got asked, of course,
moment of silence or cheering.
It was awesome. But when I first got asked, I had the initial excitement, but then immediately after that, I got really scared. Almost to the point of I wanted to say no. And it wasn't because I was scared to talk in front of 8,000 people. And it wasn't because I was scared to get up on the stage and I don't look the way I want to look, right? It wasn't that. Mm-hmm. What scared me was that when I left corporate, I went through a pretty big kind of awakening. And what I realized in that moment is that the way I had been treating people and the way I had been going about getting the successes that I got, I could no longer do that, right? That overachiever in me, right, was in the driver's seat to the demise of everything else, And again, I accomplished amazing things with her in the driver's seat, but in that moment of realization, I was like, you got to get out of the car, we're done, And it was such an extreme realization that I put her away and I was very I locked the door and I'm like, you can't come out until I know how to deal with you. I don't know how to deal with you.
Let me interrupt you. I know it's rude. When you say to the demise of everything, because she was driving, what do you mean?
Oh, just the way I had really no personal, really deep relationships. All of those had been pretty significantly damaged. Again, people were just transactions. I was horrible to some of the people that I worked with. It was a get it done or get out of my way, was very much a part of some of those relationships and just the levels of kind of manipulation and, and even my own, I was not a part of the equation other than my brain and what I could do, you know what I mean? But the holistic me was not a part of that equation because I didn't need it, I didn't need it, to get it done. And so it was just a lot of things on the relationship front were not good in every engagement I had. Wow. So when I put her away and then I got, fast forward 3 years and I'm very much in the just be humble, go fetch water, chop wood, let's refigure this out.
I love that imagery.
And then, when I got that invitation, the thing that scared me the most was that I knew that in order to do that, because I had spoken in very public forums in corporate, in order to do that, I needed her. I did not know how to get onto that stage without her. And so for probably 2 months prior, I did a lot of work, really hard work on integrating of okay, we're opening, we're unlocking the door. That's all we can do today. Or it
feels like Pandora's box a little bit, right?
Yes. Yeah. And it's, again, the friend that I'm always referencing, she helped me in this one epiphany conversation we were having about, be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. And it was that merging of like, I need both the serpent and the dove in order to walk onto that stage. And I've been letting the dove go, and I need the serpent to help me in this moment. And so it was like, okay, both of them have to be here together. And anyway, and that was so all the way back to your question of how do we walk together with them? I think the only thing I know right now is being aware of her and trying to sense into, because she's super clever and like she knows how to get into that driver's seat fast, like before I even know it.
Okay.
Oh yeah. So to start to really sense into, for me, it's this difference between curiosity and desire. So like if I'm feeling my action is driven by desire, I know she's in the driver's seat. Versus if I can like get into being curious, she's not. And like, so that's currently the work, is like the only way I know how to integrate is if I can get more aware of the trigger for her to get in the driver's seat and balance that back out.
So talk to me about those triggers, because I think that the language you're using is refined, and graphic is the wrong word, just very visual as far as dove, serpent, and tyrant and all these things. But I think so much of it has been vaguely put as like old identity, new identity, but there's this abandonment of old, right? Like the death of the old and this reborn kind of thing. So my question is how do you trigger her? How do you get her?
I don't have to. That's the thing. Like she's just there. Like she ran the show for so many years. She's there. Like she is the part of me that wants to get to 1 billion. She's the part of me that wants to like grow a movement. She's the part of me that wants to be a thought leader, right? She's a part of me that wants to get invited onto stage after stage after stage. Like she's the part of me that is the driving force of accomplishment, and wanting to learn more and wanting to be smarter and like she is very much behind all of that. And again, like I'm thankful for her in terms of what I've been able to accomplish, but she can run off the rails. Like she's got a one-track mind. She's very one-dimensional.
So it's not as much about not like triggering her and inviting her in. It's more about taming her.
Yes. It's so funny. Have you read Glennon Doyle's book?
No.
Oh my gosh.
I will put it on right now. What is it?
Yes. It's called Untamed. And she talks a lot about, so in her book, she talks about going and watching this jaguar. I think it's a jaguar. And that's where she first got this idea for the book. And she's going and she's watching this jaguar. And this jaguar is this caged beast, right? I mean, this is like one of the fastest animals on the planet. Right. And here she is in this cage, right? Yeah. And she talks a lot about that imagery and what it means to just be females in this world and the taming that happens. And her basically call to action or call to arms is like, be untamed, but not in like a unaware way, not in a blind way, but in a like recognizing that you are a jaguar and like, how do you live in the fact that you are a jaguar? And so I think it is, I don't want to identify with that overachiever in me, but it's how I am wired. And so how do I channel it? How do I, make sure that I can leverage the strength of it, but not get overpowered and over-identify with it.
Okay. Totally just ordered the Audible. So thank you for that.
Amazing.
Like literally in the middle of your amazingness.
It's really fun. Yeah. It's really fun.
I'm really excited. So what's so fascinating, you and I both have a soft spot, whether that's the right word or not, you can make up a new word that's better, for women. Women in the industry, right? Yes. And for female customers. And we're very aligned on that mission and that movement together, and we will conquer it and we will hit the billion. Okay, Andrea? Will. Yes. And what's fascinating is on this podcast, I've never had a male guest that ever felt like they were embarrassed of their driven nature.
Right.
That they were embarrassed of being a jaguar. Yes. And so tell me about growing up as a female and where, like, did that cause you to feel embarrassed of being driven? Like, tell me a little bit.
When I was a kid, it didn't, because I was really privileged in that both my mom and my dad, my mom was pretty hardcore feminist, and my dad actually studied women's studies, and he was a coach of a female volleyball team. And so he understood like the female athlete psyche. And so in my family of origin, it was expected that we have an opinion. It was expected that we had a voice. If we didn't order our food, we would get no food. Like it was very much driven, like be intelligent, have an opinion, speak up for yourself. And so for me, who like I'm more communicative than my sister, right? Like it was super fun, like for me to like, I do what I want, when I say what I want, you know what I mean? Yeah, absolutely. But then when I entered into more social environments, right, where I also have a deep longing for connection, those were oftentimes at odds, right? Because of I didn't know how to navigate me being outspoken, me having an opinion, me being assertive, me being aggressive, right? I also want to be relatable and connect. And so a lot of times, because I just didn't have the skill set to understand that, I think I defaulted to, and that's why I ended up where I ended up in corporate of I am who I am. I'm going to be assertive. If you can handle that, you know what I mean? It was all of this, very you're with me or you're against me. You like me or you don't like me. I get it done and you like it or you don't. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because I didn't know how to understand the nuance of what was happening both culturally and my over-identification with achievement, which had nothing to do with me being female, right? But I think that as females who are more assertive, I do think there is still a cultural nuance there that is not acceptable. And so anyways, this compounding thing I just did not have the skill set to understand all of that dynamic and how to navigate it, Yeah.
Well, and what a blessing you're bringing to the world of that you were willing to almost go too far so that you could, and this is what I see so much in a woman's journey is in order to sort of survive, we do have to push it too far. And then there's almost a correction and a coming home or an arrival. I mean, there's a million words we could use because we're talking journeys, right? This is our world, right? But that she comes back this refined, more complete version, but it's not an abandonment of the aggression and it's not an abandonment of the driven nature. It's kind of a unification of both of the beautiful parts of her.
Yeah. In fact, actually, and I think you and I have talked about this a little bit, and this is definitely your world more than mine, but I was doing research on the hero's journey, right? Because I'm for a very separate thing. But there's a couple different models out there that are actually the heroine's journey, and that the hero's journey and heroine's journey, there's this nice debate on whether it actually is different or not. And based on what I've seen in the heroine's journey, I actually think that there's a lot of truth to that, right? Where the hero's journey is, they have the calling and then they go out and they go into the underworld and they arrive, returned with something heroic, right? Yeah. I think you're right, Sarah, in that for the heroine, I think it is that it's a dismissal of the calling. It's I want to conform. And then the underworld is really a realization of when I abandon my own knowing that the thing that gets brought up or the thing that gets created is not sustainable and is ultimately corrupt, and that's dramatic language, but I think it's true. And so I think it's what happens in the underworld is really that recognition of I can build it, but it's not built on a foundation that's sustainable. And so the return home is really this return to innocent knowing and how do you bring that innocent knowing into the world, with all the skill set you've acquired, you know what I mean? But how do I bring that back into the world in a way that is coming from the innocent knowing place and not from the abandonment of that knowing?
Yes. And the saddest part of the heroine's journey is if they are completely unwilling to go to the underworld.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That unwillingness, because they don't even start or evolve.
Right. Exactly.
And they're into conformity. They're trapped into either liberalism, conservatism, whatever they were handed, they stall.
Yes.
Right. And we've seen both sides. And I think that the message here is that the underworld is part of the entire point.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. And it's the thing that actually helps us connect as humans.
Yes.
It's the ugly, it's the vulnerable, it's the I don't have it figured out, it's the I struggle. That is the part where we actually connect. It's not the return home.
Oh, I'm dying. Girl, we've got work to do together.
I can't wait.
We've just got work to do together. And I just want to really hone in on that message there that, Andrea, I would say you're unique as a female in the sense that you grew up with both parents promoting the idea of you as a daughter speaking up. I actually grew up in that same household that you did, And I wouldn't say that like we had to order our food, but I'm like, that's a really brilliant way to illustrate it, you know? But I did have a mom that worked from home, and working from home wasn't a thing, you know? And so I'm just really aligning with this fact that it actually, while it influences where you go and how you think and those kinds of things, the kind of home you grew up with, the underworld is vulnerable, is necessary and vulnerable for anyone to be able to light that yin and yang inside, right? So that yin and yang inside. And it should be a place in which we are compassionate with each other. And it should be a place in which we encourage evolution, and we encourage exploring gifts and talents, and we encourage failure over and over and over, because like with kids, or with our communities, or with our influences, or with the people we sit by on the pew, like encourage that kind of messy, right?
Yes. And not encourage as in like get through it, but like encourage as in like I'm holding space for you. And as you navigate this really important thing, like I'm here and holding space, and it's something really important is happening right now. So yeah.
I love this so much.
Well, I think circling it back to entrepreneurship, to what you were saying, Sarah, I think it is that the entrepreneurial journey, I often say, births us more than we birth it, because what it demands of us is like, I think when we go into the doldrum and we're in like another person's system, we can just get like admired with our own crap, you know, like our own, you know, and just trying to navigate that system. But I think as entrepreneurs, we're creating the system. So there isn't this like layer of perception that we have to do. It's like, we're just raw and vulnerable and have to be honest, because we are the system. You know, it's like you can't fool yourself on that. I don't know.
That is so good. That is so, you can't lie to yourself.
No.
And so if you were to look at the Andrea that was starting to see her corporate self fall apart, like that was probably very much posturing, right? That would be a word I would throw into the underworld.
Oh, yeah. I was a posture pro.
Yep, queen. Yep, that's an underworld word for sure. So you look at her, and then you look at the Andrea that was on stage at Funnel Hacking Live 2023, right? I love that we can put that in the same sentence. I just think that's so cool. Like, what would you tell the corporate Andrea?
Oh, she wouldn't have listened to a single word, but I would. She was on a mission. Nothing was going to stop her. But I think it is more of just a gentle reminder to be aware at the degree to which you're trying to manage perception. And like in that, you know, feeling into that and knowing that another key thing was like emotions are not the enemy. They're an important signal system to something that is much more profound happening, and leaning into that with a curious mind is actually the opening. Like that is the door. Again, I don't think she would have listened to a single word of that, but so maybe in her language, I probably would have so David White has been an opener for me through my entire life. He's a poet, and he wrote a couple different business books. Actually, he's amazing. And so I probably, knowing that she probably wouldn't have listened to me at all, I would have just said, keep engaging with David White, because that is the one time that is like the constant opener into something that's more profound than all of this achievement crap. You know, all of this achievement stuff. That's not really it.
What's so interesting is that you actually would just keep her connected to someone you knew could get her out of it.
Right. He has this really beautiful language. He says, poetry is the language for which the ego has no defense. And I have found that to be true myself. And so, yes, I would totally lean on him, because I don't think I would have the powers to get through.
I love that so much. And I think what it introduces there is, in our own lives, whether you feel like you're on the arrival part, or you're in the middle of the underworld, oh, God be with you if you're there. We love you. Get in there. You'll get it. You know, we're here to help, kind of thing. That I just think that as much as we want to pray our way out of it or run our way out of it, that it is often through other people that our needs are met.
100%. Yeah. I did not come to the epiphany on my own. Like that whole transformation was not of my doing. I think there was a readiness, but it was my friend that I keep referring to who invited me down to a retreat where I basically got kind of hit upside the head in the most beautiful spiritual way. And that was the awakening. This was not anything that I asked for. This was not something I was actively pursuing. This was a friend who is my like ride or die. And I said yes. And I didn't know what I was getting into. And it just happened. So it is only through other people that happens.
And she never, I'm assuming it's a female, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it never could have happened had she not sat in a place of compassion and awareness with you, right? 100%. And that's what I really want to drive home with our entrepreneurs is like, stop the judgment.
Yes.
Like I had a conversation with someone on Voxer the other day and she's like, good thing I'm not Jesus. And I'm like, yeah, good thing. Right.
Yeah.
Like, and if you were, you'd sit with the person. Right.
Exactly. Yes. And I mean, we've heard it before and it's kind of cliche and mainstream now, but I really do believe that like our judgment in others is really just a part of ourselves we haven't accepted. There's something there that, it's more about you than them.
I love this so much. I love this so much. Andrea, I'm going to have to bring you back on. I think
anytime, Sarah, I love chatting with you.
This has just been such food for my soul. And if anything, it will just change my life and pivot my life and bring awareness to my life. But I have no doubt that if it's helping mine, it's also going to reach so many other people. You guys, we obviously are here to talk about the conversations that are just really not happening in entrepreneurship and about the fights that we're fighting and the victories that we're aiming to win. And if you want to dive into Andrea's world, she's totally a genius in more ways than she's brought to the table even today. And you can find her at geekoutconnect.com. We'll put all that in the show notes if you want to dive into her, her professional life and all those kinds of things. That's a great way to make that happen. But what I really take away from this is not to be embarrassed by the driven nature. And not to be embarrassed about the failures and the lost relationships and allow that to be an awakening for you to then turn and serve and help other people, including yourself. And I just love so much that you've been willing to be so vulnerable and open. This is why you're one of those great humans. I just know it will impact so many people by you being so open and vulnerable. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. I love the conversation and the platform that you're creating and just the ripple that you're making in the world is so needed. And I appreciate it so much.
Incredible. Well, listeners, let's give a huge thank you to the amazing Andrea Peer. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Unreasonable Autonomy podcast. If you loved this episode, my guests and I would love to hear about it. Go to the show notes to reach out and let me know what resonated with you or what topics or guests you want to hear in the future. I am here to create for you. Look, I deeply admire your commitment to pushing boundaries and going after an unreasonable life. Keep dreaming big, taking bold steps, and expecting the unreasonable. For more, go to the show notes to dive deeper into the conversations that will keep you going. Thanks for being here.